Welcome back to Locked On NFL Draft. We appreciate you making us your first listen today. This is fun day. It's Tuesday. It's risers and fallers. Who are the guys that are making a name for themselves that maybe we haven't talked about yet? A couple of wide receivers on tap, and we're going to get into a number of other things. Welcome to Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On NFL Draft. And we want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back, Eric Crocker. And as always, I'm joined by my guy, Ryan Tracy. Ryan,
Hey.
I always ask how you're doing, but I'm assuming you're feeling a lot better after that win the Kansas City Chiefs had yesterday.
It's nice. It's nice to see it all come together. And I'm not one that gets too down. I generally am on my show, I'm the one that talks the fan base down from getting up in arms, right? Because it's going to work out most times. I believe that. But it all kind of came together. They exercised most of their demons last night, and it definitely sets the stage. And they are one of the teams that I think it's really intriguing about the Kansas City Chiefs this year. After going to back-to-back Super Bowls, some of the key contributors, not just last night, but for the season, are rookies on that offensive line, in the secondary, young players all around. The middle linebacker, Nick Bolton's playing well. Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey. Creed Humphrey might be the best center in the league right now, and he's a rookie. He's 10 games in. It's pretty impressive. And that's why this show exists year round, because you never know when you're going to find that guy that makes a difference for your team.
Right. And one thing before we get into, some of our first topic, we're talking about this prospect. One thing that kind of stood out to me while watching Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football was Mahomes. For everything he was, it was almost like he could play even better. And he had like a historically great game, threw for over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. And I thought he missed some throws.
Yep.
Like he missed some throws that like just overshot receivers like more than 2-3 times. And even then still was able to put up great numbers, had great production from everyone. Man, it's scary to think about where Kansas City Chiefs are right now. A team that is they've been up and down, and just at any moment it can start clicking, and it looked like it did last night. But speaking of clicking, you talked about a receiver. I haven't watched this guy, but this is a guy that you feel like is someone that people might start taking notice, and that's what this show is for, Locked On NFL Draft. So talk to me through this receiver that you've been looking at.
So we talked a little bit yesterday, right, about the quarterbacks that need to get a little bit more recognition. And Bailey Zappi, I think it's Zappi or Zappe, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, from Western Kentucky is one that's been growing, right? And I got a tip on him, 5-6 weeks ago from somebody I trust who watches a lot of Western Kentucky. And so I started watching. And as I started going, one guy in particular that he was throwing to kept standing out to me. And I just kind of let it go for a while. I've been keeping it to myself for a little bit because I don't want to get, the hype train going too early. But at this point, when you look at what Jarrett Stearns is doing, he's in the top of the position across the country. And for that offense, clearly an offense that is based on the passing game, 42 touchdowns and 7 interceptions for the quarterback. The wide receivers get to reap a lot of those benefits, right? When that's the focus. And there are a number of guys that catch well there. But in terms of, I got to look up his total stats, making the most of your target share, I feel like it's a team that really sets you up, and sets him up in particular, to have that kind of output. And he's sitting here now 10 games in at 1,350 yards on the season and 11 touchdowns. I don't believe he's the number one touchdown receiver at his school. And that's what stands out to me. Wow. The cool part for me is I look Chiefs first, generally at wide receiver, because there's always who's going to be the next Tyreek Hill, right?
Right.
And Jarrett Stearns is a smaller guy. I think they list him at 6 foot. So, he's 5'10" and a quarter, basically. He lines up in the slot the majority of the time. He's built real thick. He takes contact extremely well for a guy his size. I'm not going to start with the comparisons. We'll get to that in the off season, but he's somebody that I think can do a little bit of everything. I question like his super deep speed, but he's somebody that just keeps being productive in a pass-first offense that I think could translate really well.
Aside from like the Tyreek Hill thing, if we were to say, or even just what round, right? Like, a guy that could possibly be entering the NFL draft. Like, what's it going to take for him to start to get on teams' radar? Is it going to be maybe run a faster 40 time? Or do you think that maybe these teams, they notice him, but he might be somebody that slips through the cracks? A few years ago, 49ers drafted a receiver by the name of Richie James, and he was someone that was, he had some production over there at his school, played at a smaller school. But, what do you think his draft stock is right now?
I think he's lucky in that there's been a couple of players from Western Kentucky that showed up on the radar in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And so I'm guessing area scouts are understanding that. The attention the quarterback brings to the program is definitely something that I think will get him exposed. And so what may have been a late round sleeper a year ago, in fact, he wasn't even there. He was at Houston Baptist a year ago. He is a transfer. First year in this offense, and he's put up almost 1,400 yards, and that's a pretty good standout. I do think that when it all comes said and done, it's going to be about, I believe, let's see, is he a senior? No, he is I think he's a redshirt junior at this point. So maybe not an all-star, might see an East-West, not a Senior Bowl invitee is my guess. So he needs an all-star game, and he does need to test well and take that question mark off the top. But I know he's on radars, and I know, let's see, Michigan State, he went for, what was it, 17 catches for 180. He's on some big school radars, and I think he's somebody you're going to see. I don't know if he'll break the top 100. Right now, I probably have him as a day 3 guy, but one of those guys with so much upside that you can see him growing into a significant role in the league.
Right. And we haven't, this guy I'm going to bring up right now, we haven't, prepped for him, but Zay Flowers, he's a receiver at Boston College, 5'10", 117 pounds. He sounds a little bit like this guy that you're talking about. With Zay Flowers, he's been more of an explosive guy. He's averaging over 16 yards per catch. Hasn't had maybe the production this year that he was like. He's a junior, but I think if he were to come out into the NFL, he's somebody that teams would be like, okay, like this is a guy that we really like right now. CBS Sports, if you paying attention to them, they have him as a top 10 receiver in this class. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see where all these guys kind of pan out, and not just like the big name guys, because we know about the Treylon Burks, we know about the Garrett Wilsons, the Chris Olaves, and even guys like Drake London at USC. But there are some of these lesser known guys that they always pop up around draft time. They always end up kind of maybe running a faster 40 time, and people be like, let me start looking into this guy. So I think, the receiver that you're talking about, Zay Flowers as well, I think those are two guys that will start to be talked about a little bit more. And while you are talking about them in life, I mean, we are all bound for different things, which beachbound.com vacations, you could be bound for a really good adventure, bound for passion, bound for discovery, or bound for togetherness with your significant other, and bound for immersion, bound for rejuvenation, or you may be bound for encountering the unexpected. Personally, when I'm at a beach resort, I'm bound to end up at the poolside bar, or maybe creating my own taco flight. As long as I've got a good view with a good drink in my hand, I'll be happy as can be. And with beachbound.com, you can find that perfect beach vacation for you. So if you guys are looking for a beach vacation, maybe not, this winter, but start preparing for the spring, for the summertime, look no further than beachbound.com. Go do that today. Plan ahead. I'm usually really bad with planning ahead. My family, we want to go back to California for Christmas time, and I'm looking at the prices like, gosh, wish I'd have bought these tickets and prepared for this a long time ago. But speaking of preparing, we're talking about this next guy, receiver. All right, we're going to continue this receiver talk and underrated guys. We got Romeo Doubs from Nevada. Now, we've talked about the quarterback there, Carson Strong, and all that he's done, but a big part of Carson Strong and him being productive and him doing well is throwing to senior receiver Romeo Doubs. We're talking about a 6'2", 200-pound receiver who is kind of flying under the radar just a little bit. He's been productive this year, 64 catches, 853 yards, 7 touchdowns. Now, a big bulk of those yards came in one game against Fresno State. He had 19 catches for 203 receiving yards in that game and a touchdown. So, a lot of his production. And it's interesting to see kind of his numbers because he is a big play guy, but his yards per catch has kind of dropped significantly. Last year, he was averaging 17.5 yards per catch. This year, he's down to 13, right? So I'm not sure what can be contributed to the drop off in yards per catch, which going from a big play guy who last year he had less catches than he already has. Again, he has 64 catches right now. Last year he had like 50 something catches, but over 1,000 yards. So over 150 more yards than what he has this season. I'm not sure why the drop off in that. If I had to guess, maybe teams are playing them a little bit different. I watched Nevada play against San Jose State, and San Jose State ran more of a too high defense to kind of keep things in front of them. And that made Carson Strong. That flustered him a little bit. And it almost seemed like he didn't know what to do with the ball, kind of like Patrick Mahomes been dealing with lately, right? Teams playing that too high. And instead of taking the check down, you saw Carson Strong struggling a little bit. But when he does get in the rhythm, a lot of times it's with Romeo Doubs, and he's not the quickest guy like that, or he's not just this super explosive guy, but he's a smooth mover. I think he does a really good job so far from what I've seen him getting in and out of his breaks. He does a good job so far from what I've seen him catching the ball away from his body and using that frame. And now again, like you said, with the receiver we talked about earlier, Doubs is listed at 6'2", 200, so he's probably 6'1", right? 6'1", right. Around 200 in that range. But I do think that he's a guy that people should start to kind of take notice of, and it's tough, man. I was talking to a parent of this kid that I work with, and this kid is going to a smaller school right now. I don't want to say what school, but it's a non-Power 5 Division I school, and he's balling. He's balling. Dude's a freshman, and sometimes with the politics of coming from a certain type of school or whatever, you get kind of slept on. But he's hit the ground running. He's balling, and his dad is like, man, do you think it'd benefit him like to maybe go to a bigger university, because he's a true freshman? He's doing the thing. He started every game. He's balling. Some big university, Power 5 SEC schools calling. Should what do you think about, jumping up? And I'm like, it can help. And I think with a guy like Romeo Doubs, if he was doing what he's doing, but say he's doing it at Michigan, say he's doing it at, Ole Miss or something like that, people will be a little bit more on notice. So it's interesting to, even at this point in his career, his senior year, even after what he did as a junior, still say that this guy's kind of slept on and kind of flying under the radar. But I'm curious to see where his stock starts to go and starts to head towards draft time.
I like where you're thinking too. And I will say, for the position that he plays, I think that because of the prevalence of 11 personnel and at least 3 wide receivers on the field all the time in the NFL. I mean, honestly, the more spread that we see with empty backfields, it only puts that much more emphasis on pass catchers that can get the job done. And I mean, Doubs is in the top 25 in terms of yardage produced. I know it's down from a year ago, so technically we could call him a faller, but he's still up there in the upper echelon in terms of college production. And at the point where you're talking about, a fourth receiver that can come in, give you a little bit of a spread look, guys that can play, part of the 2-guard role, you know what I mean? Like if you're building out your basketball team, maybe they're not the big ones. That's okay. But I think that there's more opportunity for smaller school wide receivers, maybe than there are for any other position. I know that we got, NDSU quarterbacks, and we got some, Wisconsin Platte River linemen coming out every year. But I think wide receivers, there's a good group of them too. And I think the other thing that might hurt Doubs in particular, and I wonder, is like who he plays with. There's a couple of guys that I want to ask your opinion about when we get into the next one, because I think it's all pieces of the puzzle, and you have to project that to the next level on the roster that you're looking to fill as well.
Right. And there are other receivers, I think, that are kind of still slipping through the radars. We got David Bell from Purdue, and he just had a big game. When did David Bell just exploded a week ago on the scene? This is a guy who has 75 catches for 1,100 yards right now, and he's everything at Purdue. He's in 6'2", 205-pound receiver. He has explosive ability. He was a guy that when I was watching Greg Newsome, and I was really high on Greg Newsome. I thought Greg Newsome, he had my favorite film as a cornerback in the 2021 class. And a lot of it was from the job I thought he did on Bell, but that's the respect I have for Bell. I think he is someone that should be talked about more, again, like a receiver that has been productive. He's been productive for 2 years now. Everybody talked about Rondale Moore there, but, one thing that people didn't notice, Rondale Moore, when you just watch the film, especially like the all 22 and not like just highlights, he was somebody that when they went like 21 personnel, Rondell Moore wasn't on the field. He wasn't like an every down receiver, but you have Bell, he definitely was. So he's a guy that I'm definitely looking to see, how that whole thing kind of shakes out with him at just once the draft time comes. And he is a junior, so he doesn't have to come out now. But I don't know. I just think somebody with his type of talent, they're going to be coming out a little early. And I know before we get to our last guy that we want to touch on today, I want to let all of our Locked On NFL Draft fans know that there's an incredible app for everyone who needs to buy gas, and the app is called GetUpside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. All you have to do is just download the free app, GetUpside, on your Apple Store or your Google Play Store. Use the promo code touchdown and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. You don't have to pay for full price of gas at a pump ever again. Get gas right now by using the GetUpside app, and you can find it at whatever gas stations are near you. The GetUpside app will tell you which ones qualify to use, and it's easy to really get the money back. All you have to do is just add your bank account, your PayPal, your e-gift card, and your Amazon card, whatever card it is that you use, and you'll be able to get loaded right there, right now. So download the free GetUpside app and use the promo code touchdown. Start making money back on filling up your car. There was another guy that I wanted to get into, some of the guys that just kind of slept on it. And I mean, there are a lot of running backs that people talk about, but I feel like the one that's not talked about enough, and maybe because it's not like just the splashy name, right? It's not the Isaiah Spillers. It's not the Williams out of Notre Dame. It's not Breece Hall. Those guys, I think they get a lot of love, but Brian Robinson, the running back out of Alabama, talking about a 6'1", 225-pound running back who's a redshirt senior. So he's been around a lot. And I feel like when guys are like that up there in age, redshirt seniors, it's almost kind of frowned upon, almost like the NBA draft, right? Like you can be like great in basketball, but if you play all 4 years, like you're probably going to go second round in the NBA draft. Right? Like there's got to be something wrong with this dude. And Brian Robinson, I mean, the only thing's wrong with him is he's had to sit behind Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, and all these other backs, Damian Harris, all these other backs that Alabama has had. He finally gets a shot, and he's taking advantage of it. Now, I think the one stinker that people will probably look to when they start to look at, kind of dig into his numbers and some of his production, and you and I talked about how we like to, look at, hey, how do you do against this team? How do you do against that team? Well, I like to see how guys do against LSU, because a lot of times they have good defenders. A lot of times they have fast linebackers, a big front, especially for a running back. I want to see, like, okay, how'd you do running away from those guys? 13 carries for 18 yards. So not ideal against that big of, competition. But on the year, still almost 1,000 yards, 5 yards a carry. He's also a good receiving back. 23 catches for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns. He almost reminds me of kind of like he's not going to be a Najee Harris first round pick or a Josh Jacobs, but almost like that TJ Yeldon, right? A guy that goes maybe day 2, early day 3. I think I could see Robinson kind of go in that range. Just more of a smooth guy, power runner, not as explosive, but still somebody that I feel like should start to be on people's radars, and he's not being mentioned with a lot of the other guys in this class.
Well, I say this, I didn't see the Crimson Tide this last weekend, but the last time I saw a little highlight package, I actually got a little bit of hey, he almost looks like Najee a little bit, just not a lot, just a little bit, right? And that's enough. I agree with you. Like when you get to that point, if you didn't play at BYU and you're anything senior, probably you start to get looked down on, right? But like you said, everybody gets their opportunity. It's what you make of that opportunity, and now it seems like he's cruising along. I think this does feed into, like you said, there are some matchup problems. There's also some things that at that point, the running back as the positional value that we've talked about in the past, I think this probably is a cautionary tale for taking a player like that high, because you might have a need or something like that. When you have, I think, plenty of options in this particular draft, there's going to be a lot of them. My question to you, and it takes us back to the wide receivers. So we have Jarrett Stearns, a riser. We have Doubs, a riser. Did we call him a faller because of the yards per catch? Maybe I had that back.
Nah, I think we still like him as a riser in the sense of how people, who if you don't know who he is, then he can only rise, right? And he's not somebody that we're expecting. I would say like a follower is maybe like Chris Olave, right? Because I saw some
Yeah.
mocks preseason that had him going top 10. I don't think
Yeah.
Olave is going to be going top 10, and he might not even be the first receiver from his school taken. So when it looks, when we talk about Romeo Doubs, I mean, I think he should be a riser as somebody that continues to produce, even though it's at Nevada.
Yeah, I agree. I think Robinson is a riser as well. And I would say Kenneth Walker probably is too from Michigan State. Like he should be eligible. Will he come out? I don't know. We'll see. But I think it also goes back to that concept of, are you the primary guy at your position? Now, running back is clearly a different thing than wide receiver because you don't have as many on the field. You don't have as many options for where you get your touches. But it plays into that whole concept of wide receivers. Like you said, Olave, that brings me back to the whole thing. When you play with another quality player, does that hurt or help your stock? Because if I look back, Doubs is probably the primary. I don't see another guy that's really putting out a whole lot on that Nevada team without him, right? But when I look at Stearns, he's got Tinsley, who's also in the top 25 for yardage produced. You've got two guys at Wake. I mean, that's AJ Perry and I always say Jaquiri, I think his name is Robertson. Like having a pair, having a duo. Do you think that in general, as you go through your evals, does that help you or hurt you when compared to other classes or how you project to get onto an NFL roster?
Yeah, it's tough. We had a blast from the past in a recent episode, and I talked about Cadillac Williams and what was the other running back? It was Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown, right? Both running backs from Auburn. I believe they both went top 5. You don't see that typically anymore. Now, you did see Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. They both went top 10. You had Waddle at 7, Devontae Smith at 10. So it is possible. I think ultimately what I'm starting to find out, especially about these scouts, is if you produce and you test well enough and they like what they're seeing on the film, it might not matter that there is a slight drop off in certain things. Now, when it comes to Alabama and their running backs, or just running backs in general, like you said, it's not a position that is highly sought after now. So in the case of like Brian Robinson, I don't think it really matters who's producing with him. At the end, they're going to look at him, and I don't know. He kind of reminds me of. Have you been watching that running back from? He's playing for the Cleveland Browns right now. D'Ernest.
D'Ernest, yeah. He won me a fantasy game this weekend.
Did he? Wow. Well, I mean, just the fact that you could plug in a running back, and it's just like, you know what? Let's just plug him in. He could play. Yes, he's not Nick Chubb. Yes, he's not Kareem Hunt, but he comes in and he produces. I think that's the thing that makes it tough for all these running backs, especially a guy who's a redshirt senior. And I know in the analytical world, and I don't know how much you factor this in, but a lot of people, they look at that breakout age. And if you're a guy that's a redshirt senior, you're at the very least 23 years old. So that breakout age is going to be a lot later. And from an analytical standpoint, they're probably going to be a little down on it.
I think it generally is. I don't take that into account. I like to keep it real simple as to on the field production, athleticism, that kind of thing, and then put that into the equation later. But, everybody does it a little bit different. And we're going to have more risers and fallers as we get through here in the next couple of weeks, folks. And then we're going to start digging into where the stacks stack up, who goes where, and what we're going to get into. I'm looking forward to it.
Let's do it. Peace.